How's it going, everybody? This is Cameron White with White Light Astrology, giving you guys your weekly forecast of what the fuck is going on in the universe for October 15th through October 22nd. This week is definitely not super crazy, but it's very specific. It's very Venus retrograde stuff. We have a lot of lunar aspects to Venus. We have the Mercury conjunct Venus thing going on, and we're building up to Scorpio season and the full moon in Taurus. So let's start talking about it. On Monday, today, we've had the moon in Capricorn, having us a little bit detached from our emotions, wanting to get things focused. However, today is really important in Venus's retrograde because Mercury conjuncted Venus today. And as Venus retrograde in Scorpio, it's kind of like, we're really focusing on what this whole, it's kind of like changing your oil in your car, and you kind of realize you haven't changed it in a long time and it's really gunky. You're starting to realize how gunky that is, what's being brought up, what's being, what's coming to the surface, really. Now, with Mercury being in Scorpio, though, where we're talking about the way that we think, the way that we talk, what our mindset's kind of going towards, as Mercury's in Scorpio, it's getting more specific, it's getting more detailed, it's getting more emotionally driven towards an answer, towards the truth. Mercury, I was, Austin Coppock, if you guys don't know him, he's a great astrologer. However, he said this on the astrology podcast that I thought was a great way to communicate Mercury. Mercury is like a megaphone. So when you see him on top of a planet, it's kind of like bringing that into the loudspeakers, like and turning up all of the volume. So on Monday, as we have Mercury conjunct Venus, it's kind of like this Venus and Scorpio stuff just is kind of being yelled at us. It's kind of like really coming alive, becoming more and more intuitive, becoming more and more in alignment with your thoughts, and things are starting to become a lot more clear. And that doesn't always mean that it's going to be good, it's going to be amazing, but you are going to be bringing up the stuff that Venus and Scorpio wants you to bring up. And the biggest thing is for you guys to really look at that and feel that out, because, Venus is retrograde. It's time to really work on this stuff. So that's what Monday's really looking like. When we go into Tuesday, the moon's still going to be in Capricorn. It's going to make a little sextile to Jupiter, which is going to be a little bit easier to kind of get over the emotional baggage that you might kind of have with this Venus and Scorpio retrograde stuff. But it's still going to be good to kind of, just get your work done, get what you need to get done throughout the work week and that kind of stuff. But as we move into Wednesday, that's going to be the 17th. Yeah, 15th, 16th. That's going to be the 17th on Wednesday. We have the moon squaring Venus, it's squaring Mercury, it's squaring Uranus. And the moon's going to be going right over the south node on Wednesday as well. So when you have the moon going over the south node, it's kind of like really looking at where we've been, where we've came from, looking at what our past is looking like, and kind of establishing a sense of meaning with it, a sense of like, okay, this is my experience, now how can I use that to move forward? And it's squaring Venus and it's squaring Mercury, where Venus and Mercury and Scorpio are kind of like, hey, I want to focus on this one point. This is the one thing I'm really wanting to value. This is what my mind's going towards, and X, Y, and Z. As the moon squares it, it's time to really look at, okay, how can I, a good thing for Aquarius would be get out of your comfort zone to really look at how can you connect more of yourself to what that Venus and Scorpio retrograde is kind of calling you out to. How can you be a little bit more democratic and more liberal with your ideas and your, the best way to say it would be your communication with yourself, becoming more open to solutions and change, and really finding a way that's going to function the way that you kind of feel about this Venus retrograde stuff. Because it is really emotional, it is really deep stuff, but this moon in Aquarius is kind of like, let's detach from the situation for a second, let's use what we've done in the past in order to kind of move forward with this stuff. And it's going to ask you to be more open-minded, but it's also going to ask you to not detach yourself completely away from this, from the subject, and it's going to have you look at, like, what do you value more? What are you really precisely looking at? What is this? What's the root feeling and what's the root cause? So then, as we move forward into Thursday, the moon will then conjunct Mars, and it's also going to be squaring Jupiter. And I think it's going to become a little bit more difficult, where the moon going over Mars is kind of wanting to sever and cut away from, that whole Aquarius energy of being connected and getting everything done. The moon-Mars thing is going to kind of have us want to feel more detached, more getting away from everything else. And it's going to be squaring Jupiter, where Jupiter in Scorpio is like, hey, like, this is the truth. This is what we need to be looking at. What do we believe about all of this? Moon and Mars is kind of having us separate from that, having us separate from, you know, what has kind of limited us, what has isolated and alienated ourselves from what apparently this Venus and Scorpio retrograde stuff is wanting you to go more towards, wanting you to more realize. This is going to be the time to really separate ourselves from that past idea of like, oh, maybe I shouldn't isolate or alienate myself or detach myself away from that. Maybe it's time I start to really invest into it and really start to look at it for what it is. Moving forward into Friday, this is when things are going to get a lot better. On Friday, we're going to have the moon going into Pisces. And right when it goes into Pisces, it's going to be sextiling Saturn, it's going to be sextiling Uranus. And the moon likes to be in Pisces. The moon has a lot of freedom of expression in Pisces because Pisces doesn't have any boundaries. And when we have the moon here, where we're talking about our day-to-day emotions, where things are going, it's gonna be kind of easy to get lost in the sense of it all, but it's not necessarily gonna be a bad loss. It's just gonna be more of a discovering lost. It is sextile Saturn, it is sextile Uranus. So this does have a little bit of accomplishment to it, of kind of getting something out of it, getting something done. And it also has a little bit of learning something new, liberating, you know, exciting Uranus stuff. So as the moon goes into Pisces, I think you're really going to feel a lot of this more. It is going to be trining Venus and Mercury and conjunct Neptune all on all on Saturday. And this is a really big deal. As the moon goes into Pisces and it trines Venus and it trines Mercury, this is going to be a good time to have those emotional resolves and really look at things for how they are and how you feel. Like, Pisces is vulnerability. Pisces is being open with what is and what can be. And as the moon goes here, where you're in this emotionally safe spot and you can really look at Venus and Scorpio retrograde, and you can really have that communication with Mercury retrograde, not Mercury retrograde, Mercury and Scorpio. And it's going to be conjunct Neptune as well, where Neptune does have a lot of duality. Neptune does have a lot of illusion to it, but Neptune also gives us a safe space to explore those things. And I think while the moon goes into Pisces and makes all these trines and makes all these nice aspects, I think this is going to be a really good day to kind of get it all figured out and get it all solved out on an emotional level, so then later on when the moon goes into Aries, we can actually start to make some progressive forward steps on what needs to be kind of done. Now, on Saturday as well, I'd like to make this point, is that Venus starts to make her conjunction to the sun. She'll be about 10 degrees away. And that is really important when you're looking at Venus's synodic cycle. As she gets closer and closer to the sun, she's technically coming closer and closer to Earth. So Venus is really like prominent. She's coming closer and closer. She's making us feel this more. You know, I'm not big into the whole idea that the planet's gravity affects us, but the idea that Venus is coming closer while she's in Scorpio, while she's retrograde, while she's getting to the bottom of things, is a really big deal as she gets closer to the sun, where the sun just wants to light this up. The sun just wants to express this. The sun just wants to show you it. It's just light. That's all it is. So as Venus becomes closer and closer, on Saturday she hits that 10-degree mark, and it's like, you know, it's a race to the finish line basically. I think this Venus and Scorpio stuff is going to become a lot more clear on like a functioning level, not so much on a emotional level and really feeling things out. It's going to become more clear and like it's light up. It's got good lighting. It's kind of like when you take a bad selfie with bad lighting, it looks awful, but with good lighting, it looks great. Let Venus come into the light a little bit more so we could see this a little bit better. Moving forward into Sunday, we do have Mercury square Mars. And this is going to be a little bit interesting because Mars is in Aquarius, where it's kind of like, we want to detach, but we want to connect and we want to learn and we want to accomplish stuff. Mars in Aquarius is kind of like, it wants to get it all done, but it wants to do it by itself, and it has to be different, it has to be unique. Not necessarily the most creative way, but it's like very disciplined in a structured way. It's squaring Mercury and Scorpio, where Mercury and Scorpio is kind of like, this is the point I want to get across. This is what I'm feeling, and I'm going to say it. I'm going to speak it into existence. I'm not going to be afraid to. And Mars in Aquarius is kind of like, you know, this is starting to frustrate me. This is starting to, you know, it's going to feel very frustrating is the best way to put it. But as Mercury is in Scorpio, I would very much focus on, what is Mercury trying to say? What is Mercury trying to communicate? What is this final point? What is this final idea? What is this emotion that Mercury is trying to express right now? And giving Mars in Aquarius the space to really figure that out for itself. So don't get angry with yourself. Don't be so fast to like say something mean. It's like Mercury in Scorpio square Mars. Like, okay, it's going to be a really easy time to just say something kind of mean. just be careful with what you say and just be really cautious of where your mind's kind of going and see where it's going. Really be aware of what emotion Mercury and Scorpio is trying to get to and how that's affecting Mars, where that's wanting you to kind of like, you know, detach more or go away more or isolate yourself more or feel more frustrated. Let Mars in Aquarius connect you to something bigger by learning something more, being a little bit more structured and open to to certain ideas, and let Mercury and Scorpio get out what it needs to get out. You don't need to be so rash about it, but to yourself on a personal level, just understand what Mercury's trying to say to you. Moving forward on Sunday as well, we have the moon trining Jupiter. It's going to conjunct Chiron. This is a great time as the moon goes to the last degrees of Pisces. It's conjuncting Chiron where, you know, I don't really look at Chiron for every single thing, but as he's retrograde in Pisces, I think this is a little bit bigger deal at the moment because this is going to give us a little bit more of that taste of healing, that taste of understanding that we've been through with the past like couple years that Chiron's been in Pisces. As the moon trines Jupiter as well, this is giving us that confidence of that belief to move forward and that we really do understand what we're going through. And so I do think this is going to be a pretty big deal. Moving forward on Sunday as well, I keep saying moving forward, but we're still on Sunday. Mercury begins its conjunction to Jupiter, where Mercury and Jupiter are going to kind of learn a lesson together. Mercury and Jupiter have a lot of connection. You know, Mercury likes to talk, Jupiter likes to give you stuff to talk about. So with Jupiter and Scorpio, like I've been saying, you know, what's all this bad stuff in the closet? What do we really believe about all of our past, our darker stuff? What does it all mean to us? As Mercury comes closer and closer to Jupiter, this is when it's going to be more of a philosophical point, a more intellectual point, but the emotions are going to be right there with it. As Mercury conjuncts Jupiter, I think we're going to really understand this whole Scorpio phase that we've been kind of going through at the moment, really realizing, you know, what the darker truth is, what do we believe about it, is that what we want to believe about it, and really just understanding it. Like I said, Mercury, like I was talking about with Mercury being that megaphone over, you know, a planet, as it hits Jupiter, that Jupiter and Scorpio stuff is going to come alive. You know, the truth's going to be revealed. It's going to be a more philosophical viewpoint of it and more of a I would say positive. There's going to be positive results. It is Jupiter, but it's going to be very deep and it's going to be very raw. So just know that as Mercury starts its conjunction to Jupiter, that's going to be coming up in the next week or two. Then on Monday, as we come back to this video next week, we have Venus ending its square with Mars. Thank God, because it's been Venus and Mars have had like such a crappy relationship the past couple months. As the square finally ends, that tension's finally away from Venus and Scorpio, you know, being specific, wanting to get something out of this, and Mars and, you know, Aquarius not knowing what to do about it. As that square ends, that tension's going to finally release a little bit. So be prepared for that. That's going to be fun because Mars and Venus will eventually start to make their trine. So that's really good news. Then on Monday, the moon's also going to enter Aries. It's going to square Saturn. And this is when it's going to be kind of like after this moon and Pisces stuff where we felt everything, we experienced everything we wanted to. Now it's time to do something with it. Now it's time to act. Now it's time to get it all out and really put your energy into stuff. Also on Monday, it's the last day of Libra season, so it's the last day of kind of like, hey, everything's chill and everything's cool. As we go into Scorpio season, and right after Scorpio season starts, we have that full moon in Taurus. Shit's about to get very real. So I will leave you guys off with that. This week is going to be a little bit intense, a little bit up and down. A lot of emotions are going to be felt, but the biggest thing is just be aware of it and don't act out on it so fast. Really just process all of this stuff and feel it out. You guys got time. Venus is still retrograde for a little while. We got some time. So with that, I'm leaving you off with that. So thank you guys so much for watching, liking, commenting, subscribing, yeah, I can't even remember what else I want to say, but I'll be seeing you guys next week. Oh, and also in a couple days, I'll be posting full moon horoscopes for all you guys for the full moon in Taurus. I'm doing a Jupiter and Sagittarius video that's going to be coming out within the next week or two. And I also have November horoscopes for you guys, so stay tuned for all those. And other than that, love you all. You're going to be great, and I'll see you next week.